In the Chicago suburb of Franklin Park, a routine school drop-off spiraled into a fatal encounter that has become a flashpoint in the immigration debate. Silverio Villegas Gonzalez, a 38-year-old undocumented cook from Mexico and father of three, was shot and killed by an immigration and enforcement agent on Friday, September 12, 2025. Federal officials portray him as a threat who tried to run down agents. His family insists he was a long-time resident with no criminal record who panicked when confronted. Here's what we know. That morning, ICE agents said they were carrying out, quote, targeted law enforcement activity, unquote. Minutes after leaving his children at school, Villegas Gonzalez was pulled over. Homeland Security claims he resisted arrest, accelerated, struck one agent, and dragged him, quote, a significant distance, unquote. Fearing for his life, the agent fired. The wounded officer was treated for back and knee injuries before being released. DHS later labeled Villegas Gonzalez a, quote, criminal illegal alien, unquote, with a history of reckless driving. Attorney Manuel Cardenas, representing the family, disputes that characterization. Cook County records show only 4 minor traffic tickets between 2010 and 2019, speeding and driving uninsured, none involving violence. Cardenas says his client had, quote, no criminal background whatsoever, unquote. Friends describe a quiet man who spent 2 decades in the United States, working long shifts to support his sons and girlfriend Blanca Mora, who believes ICE is, quote, lying about his death, unquote. Video recorded by bystanders and nearby businesses complicates the official narrative. One clip shows officers smashing the driver's side window and pulling Villegas Gonzalez from the car after shots had already been fired. Another camera captures agents parking in front of his vehicle, approaching, then his car reversing, moving forward, and finally crashing into a truck. A separate feed records 2 loud pops, believed to be gunshots, before the car rolls to a stop. The shooting took place against the backdrop of, quote, Operation Midway Blitz, unquote, a Trump-era initiative launched in Chicago days earlier. DHS said the mission targeted, quote, criminal illegal aliens, unquote, who flocked to sanctuary jurisdictions. The sight of agents in military-style gear, faces covered, has heightened anxiety in immigrant neighborhoods already wary of federal authorities. Local and national leaders reacted swiftly. Congressman Jesus Chuya Garcia called for a full federal probe and release of every video frame, including any body camera footage. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker labeled the death, quote, troubling, unquote, and demanded, quote, complete transparency and accountability, unquote. Latino civil rights groups called the shooting, quote, an act of state violence, unquote. DHS, meanwhile, says the agent, quote, followed his training, used appropriate force, and properly enforced the law, unquote. The FBI is assisting in the investigation. Several questions now hang over Franklin Park. Was lethal force justified against a man whose documented offenses were traffic tickets? What will a forensic review of surveillance and any body camera footage reveal about the moments before the trigger was pulled? And how will this incident reshape the battle between federal immigration enforcement and sanctuary policies championed by many cities and states? For now, a family mourns, a community braces, and the call for answers grows louder. The outcome of this investigation could resonate far beyond one suburban street, influencing how and at what human cost the nation enforces its immigration laws.
On September 4, 2025, a sweeping immigration raid hit Hyundai Motor Group's Metaplant America in the small town of Elabel, Georgia. A single operation so large, the Department of Homeland Security called it the biggest in its history. The effects were immediate and deeply personal. Hundreds of families found themselves in crisis overnight. The raid was dramatic. Federal and state officers arrived in force, backed by helicopters and armored vehicles. By day's end, roughly 475 workers had been detained, all accused of overstaying visas or lacking proper work authorization at the construction site of Hyundai's electric vehicle and battery plant. Agents seized phones on the spot, cutting off workers from loved ones and sparking frantic calls to community hotlines from as far away as Seoul. For families, ordinary routines collapsed. In many homes, the detained worker was the sole breadwinner, the driver of the family car, the person who paid the rent. Within hours, local nonprofits like Grow Initiative and Migrant Equity Southeast were scrambling to deliver groceries, baby formula, and rides to medical appointments. Panic quickly gave way to the harsher reality of lost income and looming bills. Two vastly different stories then unfolded, divided by nationality. More than 300 of those detained were South Korean engineers and technicians. Their government lodged an official protest, negotiated directly with U.S. officials, and chartered a flight that took most of its citizens home within days. While they are now safe, many face uncertain careers and questions about whether they will ever be allowed to return to U.S. work sites. The nearly 200 workers from Mexico, Guatemala, Colombia, Venezuela, and elsewhere have had no such lifeline. Lawyers say some held DACA status or valid work permits, yet remain entangled in a slow legal process. Their families, still in Georgia, are left to juggle rent, childcare, and legal fees with little information about when or if their loved ones will be released. The diplomatic fallout has been just as thorny. South Korea is a key U.S. ally and one of the largest investors in America's clean energy manufacturing boom. Images of shackled Korean workers aired widely in Seoul, igniting public anger and prompting some companies to rethink expansion plans until visa rules are clarified. Local politics also simmer. Some residents say the plant overlooked homegrown labor, while immigrant rights advocates argue the raid will drive undocumented workers further underground, making work sites less safe and wage theft harder to report. Hyundai, for its part, notes that none of its direct employees were detained, but has promised to review subcontractor hiring practices. What began as an enforcement action is now a multi-layered crisis. A story about families torn apart, a diplomatic partnership under strain, and the fragile human link in the global supply chain that brings electric cars to American roads. The events in Elabel remind us that behind every headline about immigration policy or green tech investment are real people whose lives can change in an instant.
In California, a long-simmering debate over transparency, safety, and the public's trust in law enforcement has reached a turning point. State lawmakers have passed a pair of bills that would bar most police officers from wearing masks that hide their faces while on duty. The legislation now sits on Governor Gavin Newsom's desk, and whatever he decides could ripple far beyond the state's borders. The push for new rules began after a series of summer immigration raids in the Los Angeles area. Federal agents, many from ICE, conducted operations wearing ski masks and other face coverings. Community members and local officials said the tactic felt less like professional policing and more like secret police activity, sowing anxiety, especially in immigrant neighborhoods, and making it nearly impossible to distinguish legitimate officers from criminals. Enter Senate Bill 627, nicknamed the No Secret Police Act. Authored by State Senator Scott Wiener, the bill forbids local, out-of-state, and most federal officers operating in California from wearing masks designed to conceal their identity. As Weiner put it, law enforcement should never be easily confused with the guy in a ski mask robbing a liquor store. A companion measure, Senate Bill 805, the No Vigilantes Act, requires officers to display a name or badge number that can be read from a reasonable distance. Both measures reached the governor at the same time, giving him until October 13th to sign them into law or issue a veto. The proposed ban is not absolute. It makes clear that facial coverings remain allowed in several situations: SWAT or other high-risk tactical operations, approved undercover assignments, motorcycle helmets and other safety gear, medical-grade masks such as N95s, and protective equipment for wildfire response, hazardous materials work, or similar emergencies. One carve-out is drawing criticism. State-level agencies, including the California Highway Patrol, are exempt. Supporters call that a pragmatic compromise. Opponents say it undermines the entire effort. Advocates argue the bills are about accountability. If officers can be identified, they say, the public can better trust that any misconduct will have consequences, and criminals will find it harder to impersonate police. They also see the legislation as a direct response to what they view as fear-based tactics used during federal immigration enforcement. Police unions and many rank-and-file officers see it differently. They contend anonymity is sometimes essential for protecting officers and their families from retaliation, doxing, or violence. The Department of Homeland Security, which oversees ICE, has defended mask use on those grounds. Critics of the bills also warned that California may be overreaching by trying to dictate how federal agents operate within the state. Under the U.S. Constitution's Supremacy Clause, federal authority generally trumps state law, a question that could end up in court if the governor signs the measures. Governor Newsom has voiced skepticism in the past about whether California can regulate federal officers this way, but he has also championed police accountability and immigrant protections. His decision will signal how he balances those priorities, and it will likely shape the broader national conversation about what police officers should look like in a democratic society. If signed, these bills would be the first of their kind passed by any state legislature. Lawmakers in other states, as well as in Congress, are already watching closely. Whatever happens in California will set a precedent, either demonstrating a new path toward transparency in policing or reinforcing the limits of state power when it clashes with federal practice. For now, the masks may stay on or come off depending on one signature. The deadline is fast approaching, and the eyes of the nation are on Sacramento.